Ironman 4x4 Tundra install. This is happening. Yes! If you're watching this video, it's safe to assume I am dead and you need help installing your Ironman Foam Cell Pro kit on your 2007 to current year model Toyota Tundra. So unless you've got a screw loose, fixed it. This video is going to make it super easy and simple for you to get the gear installed. I like to start on the back of the truck first because your leaf springs and your shackles, they're not adjustable. So let's get the back of the truck done first, get it on the ground, then we can see where we need to be for the front end. Okay, I've already got the wheels and tires off the truck and I have it jacked up. I think it's better to put jack stands underneath your rear axle. So don't jack the truck up in the back too high. You actually want your axle low. Then what we'll do, we'll take a bottle jack, we'll support the pinion side of our rear differential, then we can jack up the frame of the truck, and as we do that, it'll lift our leaf springs up and off the rear axle. Makes it way easier for getting those leaf packs out. Grab your tire removal tools. These bad boys just snap together like that. Click into place, and then you feed it right through this little hole underneath the center of your tailgate. You'll see it and go straight back. Coming down. If you don't want to lower your spare tire down all the way, get it as far as you want. Lift one side of the tire, hold it, take the carrier out. Done. You can tuck it up out of the way. Now before we want to mess with dropping out our leaf springs, make sure you install your Ironman 4x4 1197 brake line extension kit. If you drop it down now, you might put stress on those brake lines and your ABS wire. Don't want to do that. Do that first. Yes. This awesome kit comes with an ABS extension bracket, brake line extension bracket, two 13mm bolts with nylock nuts and washers, and for a non-limited time, this kit does not come with a 13mm socket. This one's mine. So we've got to undo these four 12mm bolts right there. You don't need a wrench because they're all encapsulated. So if you've got an impact or a ratchet, just undo them. It doesn't matter which order you take them out. So your brake lines have a little bit of flex to them. So we'll install the brake line extension bracket first. It sits up here like an A. A is for apple. Take your bolt, push it through. That goes on the back side. Take your other washer. Get your nylock nut on there. That you will need a 13mm wrench for. Take your stock bolt. Get that. Fit it in there too. There we go. Get that started. Lock that guy down. Grab your wrench. Grab the back side. All right, now let's get our ABS bracket installed. So the Ironman 4x4 ABS bracket has this little notch included. That fits right behind your stock bracket like that. Keeps it from wobbling around. Grab your included hardware. Bolt, washer, push through the front, washer on the back side. Spin that bad boy on. All right, we'll tighten that down in a minute. Now grab your stock bolt and you can finger tight that back in there. All right, that's tight. And we'll get the top. Again, this is 12mm, these are 13. For these, all you gotta do is just flip them around, upside down, flex that up just a bit, and there you go. That was easy. Same thing on the other side. So that is pretty much it. How easy is that? It's like 6 bolts, super easy. That little Ironman 4x4 1197 brake line extension kit, really easy to install. If you can't figure this out, dude, just turn in your license. You shouldn't be driving your truck. Yo, Ironman 4x4 America 1192K center hanger bearing spacer kits. These things are super useful. You can use them for a couple applications. They go into Tacomas and Tundras. So if you've got like a foam cell pro kit or a foam cell kit or a nitro gas kit, you're going to need these to space your center hanger bearing down. Now we're doing this install on a Tundra, but it's the same thing. This is the concept, you guys. When you lift a truck in the back, the axle drops, the body goes up. It changes the pinion angle on your driveline. If that pinion angle changes too much, you'll get funky vibrations or harmonics coming from your driveline. So what we can do is up here on this bracket, there's two 14 mil bolts. We're gonna pull these out, we're gonna put spacers in there, and it flattens out the pinion angle of your driveline. Tracking with me? All right, so let's get the kit out. Now, if you've got a Taco, you only need one of these kits. If you've got a Tundra, you need 2 or 3. It just kind of depends on your preference and how high you're gonna go. Any higher than 3 inches, I'd get 3 of these things. First off, undo your 14 mil bolts, but not all the way. If you just lower them down, there we go. That one's out. You can let the one side hang, drop this bolt, and look at how long the stock bolts are. So thank you, Toyota, because now we don't need to use a bunch of extra hardware. So on this Tundra, we're gonna use 2 plates. Put them up in there. Feed the plates on. Ugh! Hit yourself in the friggin' face. Find it again, put it back on. There's 2, and then just lift it back up, and you can hand thread it back into place. And now we're ready to do the other side. Spin it out. Plates go back in. Now you might need to hold the plates while you're tightening so they don't walk away on you. But once you get them positioned where you want, give it a little love. Now you got to get your U-bolts off. They're not me bolts. I cannot help you, but I'll do mine. 19 millimeter socket. Now get the other side, drop these plates off. Oh, we need to have a conversation, you and me. It's very important that when you drop these bottom U-bolt plates, that you keep them oriented in the exact same position. So I don't know if I can trust you, I can barely trust me, but I just set mine down exactly the way they came out so they'll go back in. Why is that? If you look, that plate, your axle isn't straight across. It's actually got a little bit of an angle to it. So, the more you know. These slide right out. Bump stop, save that. Where U-bolt, up and out. While you're down here, undo your bottom shock bolt. 17. Right out. And do me a favor, spin that out back on the bolt, then you won't forget about it. Beep. And do the driver's side too. Come on, man. I gotta remind you to do everything. Look, I just want to touch on this one more time because it's important. Make sure you support the pinion angle on the front of your differential. That pinion angle also sets the perch angle for your leaf springs. And if you lift it up and off and that pinion's not supported, it'll twist on you. It makes it really, really difficult to get the new leaf packs back in. You're really just doing yourself a favor. So we got the leaf springs lifted up off the rear axle, and you can see here, you want to come up about 3 or 4 inches to give yourself some room, because the Ironman leaf packs that are going back in are very large. Also, you notice that on your passenger side, as your leaf pack rises up, it contacts your parking brake cable. So just grab a 12 mil socket, and you can zip off the bracket, and it frees it up so it doesn't put it under tension. Grab a 19 millimeter socket and ratchet, and we'll get this front pin loose. You're not going to have enough clearance to get your gun in there. There it goes. Now we want to loosen up the rear shackle. And these are 19s also. You can see here there's an access hole that Toyota drilled through the mounting bracket for your hitch. So you can get to that top shackle pin. The passenger side rear shackle's out, so our leaf spring is just hanging from the front pin. Also, this leaf, it'll hang on your exhaust. So if you're doing this by yourself, you can kind of let that hang there. And like I said, you're hanging on the back of the exhaust, so if you support this with your hand, that pin will pull right out. Whoa, baby. One guy can do this, but to get the Ironman leaf back in, you're gonna need another guy for sure. But bring it towards the front and just go slow. Let's talk about bushings and shackles. Get yourself a clean workspace. I threw some paper towels down. I've got my grease gun. I've got some red tacky. And God bless those good people over at Lucas Oils for their red tacky grease. It's my favorite. They make amazing grease and horrible raspberry jam. So do not eat this stuff. It does not taste very good. The Ironman 4x4 1196 UK bushing kit comes with all the bushings and sleeves you need for the back of your Tundra. So you only need one kit for both sides. Now I've got one side laid out here, and I'll show you exactly how it works. You're going to have 4 of these small 424 UT bushings and 2 of these taller 1196 U bushings. The 2 long ones are for the rear, 2 of the little ones are for the lower side, and these other little 2s are for your fronts. So let me show you how this works. You take these 2 and a sleeve, goes like that. They go inside the front eyelet of your leaf. Then you run your bolt through, tighten it down. That's the front. The back, you grab your 1150 rear shackle. Get it out of the box here and show you. First off, take the removable side plate off. That nut off there in the washer. The inside plate comes off. Then you're going to grab your bushing. Grease your bushings really, really well before you put them on. Might as well give them a head start. This bushing goes on. This bushing goes on. And if you notice, there's a little gap between the 2 bushings. What that's for is so when you pump grease into your hollow pin, when it comes through those fluted holes, that grease works its way down the rifled bore of these bushings into this open space here. Once it hits this open gap, the grease pushes out and then works its way back down these relief slots right here. So it's a sick little design. Everything gets greased properly, and once all that bad grease is out, just wipe everything up and you're done. Take your 1150 shackle, remove the side plate. The 2 long bushings go on the top of the shackle pin. This is what goes on the frame side of your truck. The 2 shorter ones go here on the bottom and through the rear eyelet of your rear leaf spring. Then you can get that all buttoned up. That's the rear. You've got 2 extra sleeves you don't need. You can toss those. The front you do need the sleeve for. Now, the front bushings are the same bushings on the lower rear, so it doesn't matter if you swap them back and forth. Lube these up, stick them in the eyelet, run the sleeve through the middle, and once you install it, make sure to run your front leaf bolt from the outside towards the inside of your vehicle. Tighten it down, you're good to go. That's how it works. So there's another trick for installing these 1150 shackles in the back of your Tundra. You're going to need a 21 mil socket to pull these nuts off. Pull your removable plate off, and then you're going to need a 22 socket to pull this protective housing off from the Zerk side. Now, why do you need to do that? Well, you have clearance issues in the back of your Tundra. So with a 22, break this bad boy loose, spin it off, set it aside, and then you'll notice that this threaded pin actually screws into the threaded side plate. So you can't get them mixed up. The outside plate's threaded, the inside plate has a smooth bore. I like to run my Zerks towards the outside of my truck. Now we're working on the passenger side, so this would fit just like that. But again, because you have clearance issues, spin this pin out. Then when we put our bushings through the frame side of our truck, we'll slide the pin through. We can sneak this plate up, set it back in, and then spin it from the other side. Lock it down, spin the housing back over the Zerk, tighten it up, good to go. We'll start with the front. Grease this pin, throw some raspberry jelly on there. You're gonna get messy, so it is what it is. And then we'll set that guy here. Get some more. Get all that. Definitely want to use a lot. You can always clean up the excess later. Make sure to get all your surfaces. Anything that touches something else needs to be greased. Now we can get our bushings in. Jam them in there. And one in there. And now I just need the pin. Delicioso. Also make sure to grease your pins on your shackle before you put everything together. You might as well give everything a head start getting lubed up the right way. Everything's greased and ready to go in. This is the easiest way to put these Tundra shackles in. Just put one of the shorty bushings on the bottom. Our pins are greased. Show you how to get it in the truck. On the passenger side of the truck, we want to install the longer bushings first into the frame rail. So we'll install the inside one first. And then on the outside one, you might think you can get it through this access hole, but you can't. So go in between, push up, rock over. There you go. Now you can run your shackles either way, this way or that way. But I like to run my greasable Zerks on the outside of my truck because I just think they're going to be a little more protected. So to do that, obviously there's no clearance. You can't get it in there like that. So unscrew your top pin like that. Then take the pin, Zerk forward, push it through your bushings, and now you can screw it back in. Because you're not going to be able to get to your Zerks with your spare tire. There's no clearance. Now slide the shackle back. Come on. There you go. Now we can push it all back into place. Plate goes on next, and spring washers and nuts. Don't forget, we still got to put that protective hex cap back over our Zerk. And that is a 22 millimeter socket. Leaf is in, shackles, front pin, everything, leave it finger tight. We'll come back, torque it down when the truck's on the ground. Let's get this little baby shock out of the way, give us some room to work. There we go, drops right out. This is why earlier when I was telling you how important pinion angle is, because pinion angle controls the angle of our leaf spring perch. So you can see we've almost got this pin lined up. It takes a little bit of moving around, but you can see how easy was that? Dropped right into place. Passenger side's all lined up. Let's get the driver's side lined up, and then we can lower the truck back down. Much easier. So we don't have our U-bolts on yet, so be careful. I'm going to lower the truck down just a little bit to put some weight on that axle. That way the leaf springs are sitting nice and firm on their mount. Now it's time to get the U-bolts on. And the kit comes with 678 UBK U-bolts. I want to show you something on these things. We package them up really nice because all of the Ironman 4x4 U-bolts are plastic coated. Such a nice feature. Then they don't get rusted and look bad. We make the best U-bolts in the industry. And check out this. Look at the difference between stock and Ironman 4x4. It's just a really quality, good looking piece of gear. Grab your bump stops, put them back on, get the front U-bolt down and set, get the rear bolt down and set. Another tip too, make sure your U-bolts aren't tucked in or all cattywampus. U-bolts need to be perfectly up and down. If they're in, that means there's going to be slack when you tighten them down, and when your truck's bouncing around, they'll loosen up. Make sense? Makes sense. So we left our U-bolt base plate in the same orientation so we know exactly how it goes back. Sometimes getting U-bolts into these base plates can be a little tough. So if you need to squeeze the U-bolt together, that's fine too. I do them one at a time. So we'll get the front on there. Get our washer and our nut. Finger tight. And then we can drop the back one down. So the nuts for your U-bolts are a 22mm socket. You can still use an impact to get them zipped up to where they're, slightly tight, but make sure you grab a torque wrench and lock them down in an X pattern to 74 foot-pounds. Just like that. Okay, a couple points you need to know about the Foam Cell Pro shocks. The bottom bushings and the eyelet, if you notice, they're not mounted to the center of the shock body. Why is that? It's because the Foam Cell Pros have such a large shock body, you wind up getting a clearance issue. So make sure you read the sticker on the back and that you align them correctly when you install them. Really, this is for when your truck's at full droop, so it won't rub on the axle. You want to know how to put your bushings together? We get a lot of questions on this. Take one of those big old fat washers, lay it down like that so it cups upward. Take one of your bushings, bushing goes on next. Slam that bad boy down. Your flange washer goes on next with the flange facing up. That's what's going to tuck and pilot into the upper shock mount. If you had it into the shock mount, then it's just the reverse. Another flange washer that goes down. Pretend that your frame is right there. Then it's going to be a bushing, then that big fat washer, followed by the lock nut. So I'll pull the top part off. That fits up in there. Take your flange washer with the flange down, hear it click into place. That's piloted in there. Take your bushing, jam that on, followed by that big old fat washer and the lock nut. And you just need to catch a couple threads and then the whole thing can hang. So it can be a little bit tight when you're trying to get this nylock nut on the top. The goal is push the bottom of the shock up, push the top stuff down, and spin that lock nut down until you can see the top of the threaded shaft with the flats on it appear. Once you can see the top of the flats, grab yourself a 19mm ratcheting wrench, flip it over the nut, and take some vice grips and clamp them onto those flats. Now, you can tighten the lock nut down on the threaded shaft. It's important to always lock down on those two flats on the top of that threaded shaft. That threaded shaft is your piston rod shaft, and you don't want to spin the piston inside the shock. Lock down on it, use your gear wrench, go slow. As you tighten down, more and more of those flats will appear, so if you need to adjust your vice grips, you can stop, get a better grip on it. There you go, and now you can pick up the pace. The threaded shaft at the top that we're tightening that lock nut down, that has a specific amount of threads. So as you tighten that lock nut down, tighten it all the way down to where it stops. There's no torque specs. We did all the hard work for you. Also keep an eye on the bottom of your Foam Cell Pro. With it compressed like this, you can have perfect alignment on the top so that your bushings squish together evenly. Sometimes I'll put my knee underneath just to brace it while I tighten them down. Now we can lower our shock into place. Lowers right into the perch. And don't forget, the lower eyelet was welded onto the base of the Foam Cell Pro to allow for clearance. So make sure that offset is always facing towards the axle. Bottom shock bolt nut is a 17mm socket. You're going to torque that thing down to 66 foot-pounds. Dude, this looks great. All right, we don't want to tighten anything else. We're going to leave the front pins and rear shackles loose till the truck's on the ground so we don't bind our bushings up. I think we're ready to move to the front of the truck. Front wheel's off. We're ready to start ripping this thing apart. First move, grab yourself a set of pliers and remove the safety pin out of the castle nut. That's a 19mm castle nut. Break that loose, but don't take it off all the way. We'll just spin it down here. That way, when we smack our knuckle to release our UCA ball joint, this thing won't go flying. Then grab a 10mm wrench and loosen up your ABS bracket from your upper control arm. We'll get this guy out of the way. That way, when everything drops, it won't stretch or tear this ABS wire. Next up, we need a 12mm wrench to remove our brake line bracket from the spindle. These Tundras use a super long through bolt. It's a 22mm. We'll grab the nut off the backside. Next, it's a good idea to loosen up our UCA through bolt. It's a 22mm. Now, 22 is getting pretty big for wrenches, so if you don't have two 22s, you can also use a 7/8. Let's pop this mud guard out of the way. I just have a body clip removal tool here. Go slow. So I'm going to use my 7/8 to hold the bolt on the front, and I'll use the 22 to loosen the nut on the back. These things are torqued down like crazy. So to get it going, it's a good idea. You can use a breaker bar or tie a couple wrenches together. All right, that's loose enough. Now we can get a sledge and break our ball joint loose from the knuckle. This flat here is called a strike plate. Don't hit up here, don't hit down here. Hit right in this region here. All right, we got the ball joint loose, but before I take the castle nut off, grab a bungee or a rope or something and make sure you secure the upper spindle so that it doesn't fall away. If it goes too far, you can hyperextend your CV and tear the boot or cause even more damage. All right, we got a bunch of stuff loose. Let's get our strut top nuts loosened up. It's a 14mm. I like using a gear wrench for clearance issues. We'll break these bad boys loose. And I like to loosen the fronts just a little bit and then get the rears broke loose and we'll get them spun up and off. The reason why I leave the front tight is because if we take these off, the whole strut will hang from the rear 14mm nuts. Makes it tougher to get this thing out. So we loosened up the lower shock bolt. So we're going to leave this last strut top nut on here, and then we'll jump back down and get our 22mm super long shock bolt out. A faster and easier way to get this long shock bolt out, grab a 22 socket on an impact and then grab a smaller wrench like a 16. You can put it behind the head of the bolt and then back it out. Just like that. Doesn't mar anything up, it doesn't ruin your threads. These threads are ruined. These threads are not. A lot of guys will loosen this lower sway bar downlink bolt to pull it out, but I found it is a bear to try to get this thing to align and go back in. So this time I'm going to try pulling out the sway bar. It's 4 17 mil bolts. Loosen them out. Just drop your sway bar onto your skid plate there. We'll tuck those back in here. It should allow for our lower control arms to give us enough flex that we can get the stock struts out and the new coilovers back in. So instead of hassling around trying to push down on the rotor and get the LCA to drop out so we can pull our strut out, if you're doing it by yourself, just grab a nice beefy ratchet strap, hook it between the lower control arms, and as you ratchet down, it will pull the lower control arms down and away. This is just great because you don't need somebody to help you, and it buys you time while you take the old coilover out and put the new one back in. So you can see the strut dropped down out of the perch, but we're going to push it back up, get the lower part of the strut out, and then we can drop it down, lean it forward, push our upper control arm out of the way, and this whole thing pulls up and out. Now I find this really interesting at how easy we can get this out, because I've seen tons of other guys, they're pulling out the steering tie rod, they're having to break that loose, they're dropping out the entire lower ball joint on the lower control arm. So much more hassle. This is like just a few steps and we've already got this thing out. The easiest way to get this pre-built coilover in is take one of the 14 mil nuts that goes on the strut top, tuck it away so you can get to it, drop the bottom down behind the steering tie rod, and then lift it up into position into the upper shock perch. Put one of these nuts on here, spin that 14 nut on, finger tight just to hold the strut in place. Now we can get the bottom in. And the bottom drops right in. And you may need to move your sway bar out of the way. Now that everything's buttoned up, we're gonna lock these 14 mil strut top nuts down to 33 foot-pounds. And the bottom drops right in, hold it in place, and we'll get our lower shock bolt through. Sometimes this takes some messing with if you can do it, or a locating pin. Come on. Oh, good. We're gonna leave this loose because we're not gonna tighten everything up until the truck's on the ground. That way we don't pinch our bushings. All right, truck's on the ground, which means we can torque everything back down. I'm gonna start with this lower strut through bolt. This thing's massive on the Tundras. It runs through the lower control arm, the big 22 millimeter nuts on the back side. This thing torques down to 144 foot-pounds. I kid you not, that's 144. So good luck. It is tough. But I made it look easy. Come on, you can do it. We also need to lock down our upper control arm through bolt. That's that really long one that goes through the back to the front. Now we're working on the passenger side, so the nut is on the back side. This thing is a 22 millimeter nut, and you've got to put 173 foot-pounds on this bad boy. I don't know how you would do that because you can't get a torque wrench in there because of clearance issues. So the only advice I can give you is lock that nut down about as hard as you can get. I use a 22 gear wrench and then grab another wrench, lock them together, and pull as hard as you can down. Make sure the front isn't spinning, but it should set itself. Part of the issue is too, you've got to lock this down when the truck is on the ground under its own weight. And if you've got big wheels and tires, you're only going to have about a foot of throw that you can move that wrench. So go slow, good luck. Now if you're like me, you've probably lost a lot of tools. I actually don't have a 22 millimeter gear wrench. I had to borrow my brother-in-law's. There is another way of doing this. If you don't have a big wrench, grab a crescent wrench. In fact, you can get probably a little more leverage on a crescent wrench. It can be done. But when you get that crescent wrench on there, make sure you find the nut and then tighten it down. Wiggle the wrench up and down while tightening it, because that'll lock it down on the flats of the nut. If you don't, trying to put 173 foot-pounds of torque on this thing, if it's not tight, you might round off and then you hurt yourself. So don't do it. So you're gonna need an extension to torque down your front sway bar bolts, and it calls for 51 foot-pounds. But anytime you extend your torque wrench from the bolt that you're tightening, you're gonna lose a little bit of torque. So I actually turn my wrench up to 55. It's a 17 millimeter. And I always brace from the end of the wrench, try to keep it centered up. Perfect. Let's torque down the front pin of our leaf spring. That's 77 foot-pounds. And always torque from the nut side if you can reach it. There we go. And it's a 19 millimeter. Now we got to lock down our shackle nuts. Top and bottom are going to be 35 foot-pounds. It's a 21 millimeter socket. It's pretty light, but you don't want to over squish those bushings. Now that everything on the back of the truck's torqued down to spec, I'm going to raise my spare tire back up into its cradle because I want to show you a feature of those rear greasable shackles and why we set the zerks towards the outside of the truck. So this is why we installed our shackles with the greasable zerks pointing towards the outside. We're over on the driver's side. You can see in here, if we turn them around the other way, you wouldn't have any clearance because that spare tire's in the way. Grab your grease gun with some red tacky. Make sure your zerks and grease gun are clean. Plug it in there and then give it 5 pumps. If you haven't greased this before, it's going to take about 5 pumps to fill that pin full. And when you're done, clean up all the excess grease that's squeezed out, because grease is great for lubrication and even better for attracting dirt. The suspension is done. The truck looks great. I wanted to take a minute and thank our buddies over at Wheel Pros USA here in Portland, Oregon. Nick and the team completely hooked us up. So go to their Instagram and their YouTube and their Facebook and let them know what a good job they're doing over there. They will totally take care of you. Nick hooked us up with these Falcon Wild Peak MT-01s. They're 35 12.5 18s, and they're wrapped around these Fuel Vector 601s in anthracite. It matches perfect. It looks so good. There's a lot of talk about, can you fit 35s on a Tundra without having to do major cuts in your bumper and having rubbing? I'm telling you, I got these on. I didn't have to shim my bumper. I didn't have to cut anything. I took this small mud flap off the front. It's a couple 10 mil bolts. I pulled these 12 mil bolts down, slotted the holes, pushed the plastics forward, locked them back into place, grabbed a heat gun, a little basketball, and a hammer. Was able to heat this up and roll it out. I have no rubbing lock to lock. Did the same thing in the back. I was even able to keep my mud flaps on. I didn't have to cut anything. So it can absolutely be done. Don't be scared to put 35s on your truck. You can do it. So guys, if you want to see more of these awesome projects, go to Ironman4x4America.com. Check us out on YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook, or give us a call. Hard part's done. Now I get to go shake the truck down, take it in for an alignment, and in 500 miles, I'll retorque all my nuts. I love that the Ironman 4x4 suspensions don't come with this massive maintenance schedule that you have to constantly check and worry about every time you come off the trail. It's set it, forget it, and get the heck out and enjoy it. I'm out of here.